Franklin Boyd works at the intersection of contemporary art, finance, and law, integrating multiple perspectives on the art market as a finance professor, collector, board member, and advisor. She's the founder of Xipsy, an art database that facilitates contractual resale rights. And if you don't know what that means, you'll find out soon.
Maybe not tonight.
Oh,
take my class now.
Yeah, you take your class, exactly. Contractual resale rights for artists and galleries. Through Xipsy, Franklin is interested in trying new approaches to old problems and looking at how market players can work in collaboration rather than opposition. Franklin founded and is the director of Boyd Level, a consulting firm that brings financial and legal advice to the world of emerging art collecting. Boyd Level takes on projects of different natures, from forays into the art market to curatorial responsibilities for private collections. Formerly an attorney with the law firm Cravath, Swaine Moore in New York City, one of the oldest and most prestigious firms in the country, Franklin is a longtime advocate for contemporary art and, through a separate legal practice, specializes in intellectual and cultural property issues. She's a board member of several nonprofit organizations, including the Shandaken Project, which is a really amazing residency program upstate, and Smartspaces. She's a member of the Art Law Committee of the New York State Bar Association and is a member of the City Bar of New York. She previously served on the boards of Art in General here in New York City and Zero1, which is an arts organization in Silicon Valley in the San Francisco Bay Area. Franklin co-authored chapters in Edward Winkleman's book, Selling Contemporary Art, which was published in 2015. She published 21st Century Art Resale at Mutual Art in 2014 and is a contributing author to Selling Contemporary Art, How to Navigate the Emerging Market. Franklin's currently working on Fine Art Finance, a guide to extraordinary figures, which will be published in the spring of 2018. She's lectured at New York University's Art and Finance Society, at the New York Academy of Art, the New Museum, NYU's Stern School of Business and NYU School of Law, and Columbia School of Law, among other institutions of higher education. Franklin received a JD, that's a law degree, with honors from New York University's Law School, and a BSFS with a concentration in culture and politics from Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. Before that, Franklin attended Christie's Art Market and Connoisseurship program in New York City, and she worked in the General Counsel's office at the Metropolitan Museum of Art here in New York. She currently teaches at Sotheby's Institute of Art, and I'm very pleased to say that she's joining our faculty here in the MFA Fine Arts program at SVA this year. Before I ask you to put your hands together for Franklin, I just want to say how excited I am that she's joining our faculty. It's a really important aspect of professional development for all of you guys. As you know, as you can tell from my reading of her bio, her focus in the past has really been mostly on working with institutions, collectors, and sort of that side of the market. So this is a bit of a turn towards working more directly with art students, and sort of flipping the script a little bit to think about how understanding the law, issues of, for example, intellectual property, contracts, etc., moral rights, resale rights, is important for artists both established and emerging. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Franklin Boyd.
All right, so first thing I have to do is do the whole legal disclaimer thing. Anytime that you have a lawyer, we're like, oh my gosh, risk averse. So I'm going to say a whole bunch of stuff, and basically that says, don't hold me accountable for any of it. If you have specific questions, you have to actually ask the lawyer specifically. That should be pretty clear. All right, so who is the artist? Speaking of existential questions, are you guys artists? Moreover, maybe we can ask even who is an artist? And when you're thinking about the law, I want to sort of take this evening and probably even in the course to take the opportunity to present the law from two different perspectives. Because on the one hand, you can think of the law and lawyers as being about rules, right? And it's like, well, what does the law say? And what am I supposed to do? And how am I supposed to follow these rules, right? And so sure, that's one part of it, right? And that's one thing that lawyers do, is we say, well, this is what the law says, and so this is what you're supposed to do. But then there's this other side of the law, right, which is really about how we see ourselves as a society, right? And what are the norms that we want in our society? The law is a reflection of what we think those norms should be, but it's also a mirror of that ideal, right? And so sometimes we have laws that we're really trying to be a better society, right? And saying, well, this is what we aspire to. And law is not static. You know, I mean, everything that's going on sort of now with even something as boring for some people as tax reform, but that's hugely important and it'll have a huge impact, right? And even thinking about drug laws, right? And how those reflect how we feel about society, right? And how we feel about certain different kinds of drugs and what the punishments are. And those things are not static, those things change. So as you think about your interaction with the law, think about whether you agree with it, right? Because each one of you can have an opportunity to have an impact and to change things, right? So don't necessarily just accept that, oh, these are the rules and this is what I have to follow, but think about whether you agree with them, and then ask yourself, is there something different that I would want to see happen, right? Is there a different version of society that I would want to have the law reflect, right? So I sort of throw that out there as kind of one of those big picture ideas that you take with you really for the rest of your life. All right. Quick show of hands just before I get too deeply into this. How many of you guys work with other people in your art practice? Front row, back row, right, a little bit in the middle. Some people, okay, so some of you are like, I'm not sure what that means. She's a lawyer, is that a trick question? Do you want to work with people to die, right? We'll get to that. How many of you have worked in another artist's studio? Anybody? Yeah, some of you guys are like, yeah. How many of you have had people work for you? You're like, wait, how is that different than working with someone? Now I'm really confused. She's tricky. Okay. We're gonna try to tease some of these things apart. But first, copyright. Copyright is as old as this country in terms of the way that the U.S. Thinks of copyright. In fact, it is included in the Constitution, right? So the original Constitution, Article 1, says that the Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times, right, that's a key phrase, to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So this is really what gives Congress the authority to pass laws like copyright laws, trademark laws, and patent laws, right? Specifically thinking about inventors and discoveries for patent. Somebody as famous as, of course, as Sir Isaac Newton, not in the law. That's okay. Not for everyone. Too many words. All right. Sir Isaac Newton said, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Right. So there's this idea that you, as a creator, may have specific rights, but those are always going to be a little bit in tension with what other people who've come before you have already done, right? And we're not going to talk about it tonight, but for some of you, you're probably thinking, yeah, like fair use, and how does that all work? And again, we'll talk about that in the spring. But this overall concept of copyright can get a little murky, because it's kind of like, well, whose idea is it, right? And what's mine and what's yours, and how do I get to have ownership of that, right? But we think it's important, right? Because we want to, in theory, incentivize people to go ahead and create and give them some power. So we call that copyright. What do you need to get a copyright? Well, according to the 1976 Copyright Act, which is the most recent major revision of the copyright laws of the country at the federal level, which, of course, now some of you should be thinking already, maybe 1976, things were different in 1976, right? We've had a couple of things back. Great. Things have changed, right? Specifically, technology has really changed since 1976, and technology is a huge driver of how we make things that are within the copyright realm, right? How you literally make images, how you reproduce images, thinking about music, right? All of that different from 1976. So perhaps our copyright laws are even a little bit out of date, which means that a lot of this is subject to interpretation, which means that, again, you guys can think about maybe how these things should change or be changed, right? And it is an ongoing discussion. Under the current law, what do you need? You need two things to get a copyright. You need fixation and originality. Right? What is fixation? Well, fixation just means that whatever you create must be in a tangible medium, right? So this is the reason that ideas that you talk about with your best friend, those don't get to be copyrighted because they are not fixed in a tangible medium, right? So whatever you create either has to be written down, it has to be printed on a piece of paper, it can be stored in a hard drive, right? There has to be some way that you can communicate this, right? And that it can be reproduced. And of course, this is just kind of a basic intuition where it's like, well, yeah, if you're going to claim ownership of something, you kind of have to prove that it exists, right? So, all right, fixation. And then originality. And originality can trip people up a little bit because we all have different meanings of what it means to be original, right? And of course, in the art world, you could so derisively call something, oh, it's so derivative, right? Well, okay, derivative in copyright law is different than just like knocking somebody's work that, you know, you're like, yeah, we've seen that before, right? In this case, originality is a pretty low bar. It means two things. It means, first of all, that it's independently created. Right? You can't literally knock off something that somebody else did. So if you're thinking about as an author, you can't just write somebody else's script, right? Plagiarism, right? That's not original. And then you have to have this thing that we call minimal creativity. And this is where things get a little squishy in the law. It's kind of like, what's minimally creative? And you just, the courts struggle with this. But they say that the work needs to possess some level of creative spark. So for instance, a telephone book generally does not have enough creative spark. So if you have more creative spark than a telephone book, which some of you are familiar with, it's a telephone book. Back in the olden days, we used to like literally have these very thick things with phone numbers written down and names next to them. Not a lot of creativity went into this. So you know that kind of is the low bar, right, for getting copyright. But beyond that, you pretty much get a copyright in your book. Quick question. Do you have to do anything else to get a copyright? Anybody? Do you have to sign your name? No. Do you have to put the C in a circle? No. Do you have to mail yourself a letter? No. You used to have to do some of these things. There used to be these formalities, and there's still like people who are living in a pre-1976 world and will tell you, oh, but you know, you got to sign your name on the back, or you got to take a picture and mail it and do all this. You know, you don't have to do any of that, right? If it's fixed in a tangible medium and it's original, you have copyright. Great. Easy peasy. Get it automatically. Okay, so I keep saying you have a copyright. But what if you work with friends? You have good friends. They don't look like such good friends here, right? They kind of were like, it's my copyright, now it's my copyright. But you know, let's say that you work together. What if you work for an artist? Yeah, I know. Some people are like, you mean for an artist? No. Studio does not have the best reputation. What if you are commissioned to create a work, right? What if you are a human? Yeah, I told you, it's gonna get philosophical and existential, right? I mean, what if you aren't even human? I know, some days I feel that way. So what if you're not alive at all? Well, we're gonna get to that. But first of all, why do we care? Right? Why do we care? What is this copyright thing? Well, whoever is the legal author, right, owns the copyright to the work. And you can also flip that around, and this is more of the philosophical point of view, and even more of this sort of branding idea, is that whoever owns the copyright is usually credited as the author of the work. Even if maybe they didn't actually produce the work, right? But all of a sudden, it's a Jeff Koons work, right? He owns the copyright, he is the author. Okay, what do we get for the copyright? Everyone's like, it's my copyright. Okay, so tell me why you want a copyright. We're like, I don't know, but it seems important. Well, it is. We think of copyright as not actually a single right, but it's a bundle of rights. Which also means that when you have a copyright, you can split it apart. So you can have some portion of these rights, and you can also give some of them away. And broadly speaking, in the US, our copyright system is focused mostly on economic rights. And so this gives you the right to distribute the work, right? So if you want to sell it. It gives you the right to reproduce the work. Let's say you made a photograph. Well, now you can actually make reproductions of that, and you have the right to distribute that. Gives you the right to make derivative works. So what's a derivative work? Well, let's say that you had a sculpture, and then you took a photograph of it. It's derivative work. Or you extracted something from a photograph and made a three-dimensional object, right? Again, derivative work. It gives you the right to display the work publicly. This is more of an issue if you're working in audiovisual works as films, but if you have a singular copy of the work, then you can automatically display that publicly. Performance as well, again, not as significant if you're thinking about static 2D works. Termination rights. If you assign a copyright, in some instances, you can actually terminate it 35 years later. This is something that's becoming more and more of an issue in the music industry. I don't know if you've read anything about that. And then resale rights, which I have in brackets because currently neither at the state nor the federal level does the United States recognize resale rights. But as proposals continue to come up, and California for a long time did have a state law, this is attached to the copyright owner. So it's important from that perspective. And then from the moral rights perspective, VARA, which is the Visual Artists' Rights Act, also is something that is the purview of the copyright owner. Right? And this can help you prevent somebody from destroying your artwork, right? Or moving a site-specific artwork. So actually a lot of power in copyright. And a lot of economic benefits that go along with it. Well, sometimes you'll hear that visual artists don't benefit from copyright, and it's just not fundamentally true, right? It's sort of a misnomer there. Okay. So as an artist, who then owns the copyright if you go through any of these things, right? If you informally collaborate, if you share a studio with somebody and you're like, hey, you know what great is if we work together on this. And that could mean you're literally working on the same canvas together. It could mean that you're working, maybe one of you is a digital video artist and somebody else is actually making the sculptures that are being recorded and integrated into that artwork, right? Maybe you hire someone to work for you. Right? So you said that you hired people, or maybe you accept a commission. Who owns the copyright then? Who has the benefit of all of those economic rights? Well, the first and most obvious of these is this concept of joint authorship. And so this would be an example of collaboration. And the law says that a joint work is prepared by 2 or more authors with the intention that their contributions be merged into inseparable or interdependent parts of a unitary whole. Key concepts there are the intention, and then either it's this inseparable artwork or interdependent. What do we mean by that? Well, for the inseparable thing, it's a little or no meaning when standing alone. So literally, you're both painting on the same canvas, right? You can't rip that apart. You both contributed to it. Interdependent would be more of that idea that maybe you have created some sort of installation together, and so you can point to it and say, well, I did that and she did that. But if you take it apart, again, it loses its context, right? It's not as meaningful. It's no longer the artwork itself. One of the key points here is that it doesn't matter how much effort each of you put in, right? It's not like, oh, it's joint authorship, so it's 50-50, or, well, I did most of the work, so I have like 90% of the copyright, and she's got 10%. If you are joint authors, you both own what's considered an undivided interest in the copyright, which means you both have an undivided interest in all of those rights that I specified. The only thing that is your obligation is to account to each other for the earnings. So for instance, if you jointly authored let's just say a photograph, and you're considered the joint authors, and one of you sells 5 in the edition, well then half of those proceeds go to your joint author, right? You have to pay them. Okay. That's pretty easy. Most people are like, yeah, you know, if I'm working with somebody, sure, that's fine, no problem. What tends to sometimes be the bigger problem, it's not the money, right? It's how you use the artwork. Do you guys feel strongly about where your artwork is shown? Nope, don't care, just hoping it gets shown. Like super excited, like does not matter. It could be the meme of the week with cats, and you're like, yes. It's out there. You know, sometimes, you know, maybe not today, but maybe in the future, you will care about where your artwork pops up. And I will admit that when I was thinking about this next slide, the ubiquitous thing used to always be, oh my God, what happens if your artwork is on a mouse pad? And I realize we don't really have mouse pads anymore, right? I mean, I guess we have a mouse here, but do you guys know what mouse pads are? Yes, okay, good. I'm telling you, sometimes I find myself, people are looking at me blankly like, oh, what? Oh, that's cool, right? Like, I'd be psyched if my artwork were on a mouse pad. So, we decided not to go with the Van Gogh mouse pad. But, you know, what if you and somebody else had created an artwork and your co-author, without telling you, licensed that artwork to a t-shirt manufacturer? Oh my gosh, you might really care, right? If all of a sudden you were like, whoa, I don't support that candidate, right? I mean, equal opportunity here. You might have a momentary freak out and be like, no, it's mine, right? It's mine, the artwork's mine. You can't put it on a t-shirt for a presidential candidate with whom I thoroughly disagree. Then you might say, besides, it was all my idea. Okay, so what do you do, right? What can you do in advance so you're not in this position? We'll get to the contracts, but maybe you are the idea person, right? Maybe you're like, wow, how did I just kind of accidentally fall into this joint ownership thing? And if you're the ideas guy, this just looks like torturous, right? Like he's got these people in basically wooden cages, painting. Painting away my expertise. You know, and this is actually though I mock Jeff Jones because he's mockable. He's actually a wonderful speaker. had the chance to hear him speak. He is so soothing. It's really wonderful, right? He's just really a calming presence. But there's always this surprise among people who don't spend a lot of time in this place we call the art world that artists don't do all of their own work. Wait, what do you mean? Jeff didn't paint that? And you're kind of like, well, no, he also didn't personally manufacture that giant aluminum balloon dog, right? But it still boggles the mind for some people. And of course, there's a huge history of the studio and the studio practice. Even though Jeff is, in some ways, is the apotheosis of this distinction between creation and production. But we can do it. We can look at Peter Paul Rubens, right? Or one of his students, of course, Rembrandt, who sort of replaced the lions with people. Even Rodin didn't actually do any of his sculptures. So all of the beautiful marble sculptures, the entire Rodin Museum, everything except for some of the small clay models were completely produced by other people. And in fact, some of them even get credit, right? This was actually sculpted by Jean Turpin. And history refers to him as a practitioner, right? Not as the artist. So we're getting back around to that question, right? Who is an artist? Who's the artist? If the person who made one of the arguably most famous marble sculptures in the world is not the artist, well, then what are we left with, right? Well, here in the US, we have this concept of work for hire. Right? Have you guys heard this term before, work for hire? And it kind of gets thrown around a lot. And people are like, hey, it's work for hire. And it can be misused a little bit. So let's try to drill down into what we mean by work for hire. And work for hire means one of two things. Ultimately, it means work produced by one person at the direction of another, right? That's your baseline. And that other person can either be an employee, or, and this is key, only for certain kinds of work can you be not an employee and be what's known as an independent contractor and have that product be called work for hire. You also must have a written agreement if you are in this category number 2. This is where a lot of people get tripped up, because what we'll see is in those categories is probably not what most of you guys do. Just to bring it home, what does work for hire mean? It means that he is the artist. These people here doing the work, creating, well, maybe not creating, maybe just producing the objects, not the artist. Right? Artist. So what do we have when we have work for hire? Well, as I said, it can be a specific type of work that's produced and you don't have to be an employee, right? But you have to have a written agreement, and this can either be a contribution to a collective work, part of a motion picture or other audiovisual work or compilation. Sort of grayed out these other things because, I don't think they're going to be nearly as applicable. So translations, supplementary works, instructional tests, atlases. What's not on here? Probably most of the kind of work that you do in your studio, right? Paintings, not on here. Photographs, not on here. Sculptures, not on here, right? So what does this mean? This means then that if you are doing that kind of work for someone else, and they call it a work for hire, then you have to be their employee. And being an employee is a specific thing. It's not just like, hey, you work for me. Right? Being an employee means that that person has the right to control the manner and means in which you perform the work. They have the right to assign additional work to you. So, hey, work on this painting today. Oh, never mind, work on this painting. They probably are providing some employee benefits, and in theory need to be paying you as an employee. So that means regular payroll, right? Withholding taxes. I sort of want to ask, and it's dark, and I won't know any of you, but those of you who have worked in studios, how many of you feel like that you meet the test of an employee? And one. Are others of you like, wow, I'm really confused now? They told me it was a work for hire, but funny, I didn't get healthcare. Right, it's a tricky thing, and it's something that, particularly in the context of the artist studio, with people frequently moving in and out, sometimes you're working on a new show, you need new and different people, and it gets very murky very fast in terms of who's an employee, who's not an employee, and yet it has big consequences then for who owns the copyright to the artwork. So it can be pretty significant. Right, so you are probably an employee if you receive a regular paycheck and there is withholding for taxes. You're being treated as an employee. If you are assigned work that is ongoing, then you don't use your own tools and materials, right? So you actually show up in this other artist studio, you use the materials that they have provided. You know, you're not in your own studio creating something and then a few months later show up and say, oh, here you go. And you're not entirely self-directed. It's not like, hey, I just need you to go make blah. It's more like, oh, what about this? Maybe we should do this. Maybe we should change that, right? So it's much more of that interactive. Again, it's you have a boss, right? You're an employee. And in this instance, you would be an employee and you do not own the copyright of your production. This concept can actually extend further than you would think. So, classic example, 1995, there was the Oklahoma City bombing, right? And this photograph, which I have cropped, it's pretty disturbing actually. It's obviously very famous. It was on the cover of Newsweek, and it's a firefighter holding an infant who was critically wounded in the bombing. And this photograph was taken by a man by the name of Lester E. LaRue. Mr. LaRue was a safety coordinator for the Oklahoma Natural Gas Company. And when the explosion happened, he rushed to the scene thinking, you know, maybe it was a gas explosion, right? And his day-to-day work required him to photograph natural gas sites and accident sites. So he was there, and he captured this iconic image, which he then later sold to Newsweek. And probably most importantly, he also then was convinced by his wife to put the image on t-shirts. It always goes back to either t-shirts or mouse pads, right? I swear, if you just don't put your artwork on t-shirts or mouse pads, you should probably be fine. Yeah. So he put these images on t-shirts, and both the firefighter and the mother of the infant were kind of not cool with this, right? And they wanted to try to stop him from doing this, but the issue that ended up coming up was, did he actually even have the copyright at all? What do you think? Do you think he had the copyright? Do you think he owned the copyright? No. Slide kind of already gives it away, right? He did not. Why not, right? It's not a natural gas site. It's like, you know, it's a fireman and a baby. And the key really turned on the fact that he was using a company camera. Yeah, so he was not using his own materials. Now, here's something that we just have to be honest about. Judges sometimes also come up with rulings because they kind of want the outcome to be a certain way. And in this instance, you know, maybe there was that, but it's pretty clear. If you are using your employer's materials, then most of the time, your employer owns what it is that you are producing, right? Because during work hours, you rush to the site, lift your company camera, you check this picture. But we could do an entire class just on this picture because this picture also won the Pulitzer Prize, but not because there was another guy who came out from a bank who was an amateur photographer and took the basically exact same photo. And his photo went on to then win the Pulitzer Prize. And they got to fight about that as well. And of course we have all the issues with one's rights of personality as well, right? Because he's actually selling t-shirts with these people's images on it. That's all framework. But the fact of the matter remains that for LaRue, he did not own the copyright. For Charles Porter IV, whose photo went on to win the Pulitzer Prize, he did own the copyright because he used his own camera. All right, if you are running a studio, right, so that's sort of the downside of you being in the employ of somebody and losing copyright. But let's flip it around. Let's say that you're the one who thinks you have people working for you, right? Well, you might not have the copyright to what they're doing if you are just requesting a one-off deliverable, right? It feels more like a commission, so payment is a lump sum. You don't exercise influence over the production of the work. And again, if this other person is creating or producing this work off-site with their own tools, they're self-directed, and they themselves are very highly skilled. Right, so you may not be an employer, in which case then you would not own the copyright in the production. And while this isn't exactly that scenario, a lot of artists have found out that this idea of ownership of assistant's works does not always extend as far as you would like, which of course means that he is not the artist. Has anybody been following the Dale Chihuly lawsuit?
No.
Yeah, so I know, you're like, nope, missed it. All right, again, the law can be so fascinating. It's mostly human drama. Michael Moy, because you read this and you're like, oh, wow, this is going to be like a great example that I'm going to want to talk about for joint ownership and copyright issues, and then you read more of it, you're like, or people are just crazy. So, just to give you a little background, Michael Moy is either a handyman, according to Dale Chihuly, or he was a longtime trusted studio assistant. Okay, difference of opinion. And according to Michael Moy, he was asked to participate in several painting sessions. According to Chihuly, Michael Moy was allowed to come in and change some light bulbs and never ever touch the art. And there is the accusation that this lawsuit is just blackmail because apparently Dale Chihuly has some medical conditions, including being treated for bipolar disorder, which Michael Moy was threatening to disclose, and so of course Dale Chihuly and his lawyer just kind of came right out with it, and we're like, okay, yep, there you go. We're not going to pay you $21 million. But what's interesting is that in Dale's response to this complaint, his attorneys repeat something over and over again, which is they say, Dale does not work alone. He is well known for his collaborative approach to art. Dale is the sole visionary behind his art, including his drawings. He alone is responsible for the artistic vision, style, and direction behind those drawings. So what I find interesting about that is he doesn't have to be. As long as he is the employer of his studio assistants and meets those checklists, he would still own the copyright. But this gets back to that romantic notion of, no, but he's still the artist, right? And so Jeff Koons is still the artist, and Peter Paul Rubens is the artist, or Rembrandt is the artist, even though somebody else did all the work, right? They're still the artist, and it's very important, of course, to in some ways perpetuate that, maybe the truth, depending on your point of view, maybe a little bit of myth-making here. Again.
You're saying it's legally not necessary, but maybe it serves a market function?
Exactly. Yeah, so as Mark was saying, it's legally not required at all, but from a marketing perspective, for sure. right? Because you don't want a work that's just been mass produced by somebody else while Dale is sleeping, right? No, you want to believe that he personally signs off on everything, you know, looks at it with his one good eye, says yes. There you go, that's the one. Turns it around, right? So, all right. Just bring home this work for hire situation. Let's ask some questions. First question, are you an employee? Show me yes. All right, then it's a work for hire. Blue dog. Okay, yay. All right, show me employee, no. Okay, we gotta ask some more questions. All right, is it one of 9 types plus a written agreement? Yes. Work for hire, blue dog. All right. What if the answer to that is no? Then we are the elusive independent contractor, we get a different kind of balloon doll. It's pretty cute, right? I don't want one. Alright, so this is how you kind of could start to figure out when you're working in a studio or if you're hiring people. Alright, employee or independent contractor, who has the copyright? If you're an independent contractor, then hey, you are the author, you own the copyright, and this is the default categorization for commissioned artworks. So when somebody comes along and asks you to paint a portrait of them or hires you to take photographs in an event, right? Yeah, they're hiring you, they're paying you, you own the copyright, right? Regardless of whatever the deliverable is. They might own the physical piece of art, but you still own the copyright. So what if we want to change the rules, right? What if you're like, yeah, but like they want to own the copyright? Or wait, what about when I was not employing somebody and we're working on it together? What can we do? Well, written agreements are your friends. Even though people are like, oh, that seems legal, that's awkward, I don't want to do that. But you should. Collaborators, first and foremost, should try to clarify their joint ownership interests, right? So you should clarify who owns the physical thing, right? If it is a painting, where is it going to reside? Can you sell it? How can you use this object? Who has the right to revise the work? Okay? Again, what if it's a video work? Can you go back and do some editing and some splicing and be like, hey, I made some improvements? And the other person's like, what? You took out all the best stuff. What about marketing and sharing of the revenue? Maybe somebody really did collaborate, contribute, kind of a little less. Not really doing a lot of work. All right, so maybe you want to think about 75-25, 80-20. And of course, this gets a little more legalistic, but you might want to have them give you a warranty against having stolen the work from somebody else. Right? So you want to say, oh, but what you contributed is actually original work, right? And they're like, yeah, trust me. Okay, well, just put that in there. So that's for joint ownership. What about for this independent contractor? Right? How is it if I hire you and I realize, gosh, you're not an employee, and I'm asking you to do something that's not one of those 9 things, but I want the copyright. Well, there are a couple of different ways that I could get the copyright, right? You could assign the copyright to me, which means you transfer all of those rights to me. Maybe you give me an exclusive license instead. And maybe that license is limited, right? So maybe it's only for 5 years, 10 years. Maybe you prescribe what I can do with the work, right? Oh, sure, you can use it in fine art settings, but not in commercial settings. Maybe you give me a non-exclusive license and you're able to license it to other people. Again, with different restrictions, right? So there's a lot of flexibility in here. You just have to know what it is that you want and talk to the other person about it. So here's a creator who would be happy to grant you a non-exclusive license to use his work. Did you guys follow any of this? The monkey selfie? Right? He's pretty cute. So this is, I don't know, I've never heard his name pronounced, Naruto? my best guess. Anybody wants to correct me, feel free. I do not speak crested macaque. David Slater was the independent photojournalist who had arranged photo equipment, right? And according to his telling of it, Naruto, again, how he knew that his name was Naruto, I don't know, came over and clicked the button and took this selfie and a series of others. I mean, pretty cute, right? Guy's got charisma. So Slater published the photo. And then Wikimedia posted the photo. And Slater was like, whoa, that's my photo. Can you guys take it down? Because, you know, I'm going to license it and make money from it. And Wikimedia was like, you know, you've made a big deal about the fact that the monkey took the picture, so we don't believe that you own the copyright, right? Monkey took the picture, not you. You don't own the copyright.
So really, the monkey was an employee. He was using his camera.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, but was the monkey getting employee benefits? I don't know. What's the tax treatment here, right? So, and that is actually an important point, as it turns out. So Wikimedia said that the copyright belongs to the creator, and the creator is Naruto. And unfortunately, Naruto can't own the copyright. Now, who disagreed with that? Our good friends at PETA. They were like, Naruto can own the copyright. So they brought suit, which is really then where things obviously kind of skidded off the rails. So all of a sudden they're petitioning the courts on behalf of the monkey, and you know they lost, and then they appealed, right? And PETA does not give up easily. I think we have all learned that, right? Those are some dedicated people. So, like on the eve of the court, probably disagreeing with them again. They were like, woo, we don't want to have two strikes because I guess in the future we want to continue to argue that the animals should own their own copyrights. So let's just stop now. And they reached a settlement with David Slater, where Slater will donate 25% of the proceeds to protect the habitat of the crested macaques. Now, of course, the problem remains that does David Slater actually even own the copyright? And the copyright law actually includes something that speaks to this, right? So section 503.3a is not Naruto's friend because it says, in order to be entitled to copyright registration, a work must be the product of human authorship. That kind of sucks. Right? And why? Why only humans? Is it because we have this romantic notion of the creative spark that only humans have that capacity, right? You know, you've got sort of the genius of a Michelangelo. Dale, do you believe who I learned is the first national living treasure? Who knew? 1992 by the Institute for Human Potential. That is also included in his defense counsel's filing. I'm like, how dare you? It's a national living treasure. But you've got elephants who paint. Right? They're creating. So, you know, why not? Well, the Copyright Office doesn't necessarily get into the creative spark question, although plenty of commentators do. They get into the more technical economic aspect of it, right? And they say, well, animals can't own a copyright because they can't actually consent to a license, right? And they can't enforce their rights. They can't bring a lawsuit. So the Copyright Office stated that a work can be created, right? They can be the creators. So they specifically called out monkeys and elephants, was you know, salt in the wound. But if the creator is not human, he, she cannot hold the copyright. Since David Slater did not create the work, he does not hold the copyright either, so it goes immediately in the public domain, unless Slater may have the copyright if he significantly contributed to the creation of work, right? In which case it would kind of be like a joint authorship situation, except he just gets to elbow the monkey aside because, hey, sorry, not human, so you don't get your part of the copyright. So it really depends on this creative contribution to the work. And this is a decision that ultimately has to be made by the courts. Did he significantly influence the work by setting up the camera, by selecting the shutter speed, by creating the lighting, by composing it, right? Is that enough? Is that enough of the originality element that he would need to be a co-author? Well, maybe. You know, when we think about Why Only Humans, I now need to introduce my two new favorite artists, authors, musicians who are making some of the best work today. New work. Bob Dylan and Rembrandt. It's very impressive for both of them. One of them is at least still living. I think. You guys are gonna know. Okay, but I misspoke. I didn't mean Bob Dylan. I meant Bob Dylan. And Bob Dylan is artificial intelligence. So, a senior lecturer in music technology at Kingston University by the name of Dr. Ben Oded Bental fed transcriptions of 23,000 different Celtic folk songs written in common music notation known as ABC into this machine. And the machine was able to then recognize and master the patterns of song. And Bob Dylan has now created over 100,000 entirely new folk songs. We're talking super productive Bob Dylan. I listened to a few. Not terrible. You know, again, that question of creative spark. No, look, out of 100,000, they're not all going to be platinum. So Bob Dylan is a musician, and then there's Rembrandt, and of course, by which I mean the next Rembrandt. So here's a project that ING, the Dutch bank, in conjunction with the Rembrandt Museum and Microsoft, decided, why not? Let's create an entirely new Rembrandt. Just, I think, sort of particularly, irony is exactly the right word, but since like Rembrandt's works, sometimes are considered Rembrandt, sometimes aren't, it just kind of depends upon the decade in which scholar is reviewing the work. So the idea of adding a whole new Rembrandt just seemed par for the course for his market. But what did they do? How can you create a new Rembrandt? And a new Rembrandt that they didn't know what was going to come out. Right? It's not like somebody saying, oh, I'm going to get paint in the style of Rembrandt and I can foresee what I'm going to create. No, they took it apart by phases, and phase one was an inventory of the subjects. And so they looked at all of Rembrandt's works, all of the ones that are acknowledged as being Rembrandt's. And not surprisingly, they decided ultimately that this new work should be a portrait of a Caucasian male with facial hair, 30 to 40 years old, dark clothing, collar, wearing a hat, and facing to the right. So they then took inventory of those photos and did scans, right? So they did 3D scans of all of these works. And they studied the geometry, right? So they studied the geometry and the composition of the different facial features. And they used a facial recognition algorithm to replicate and generate a new facial features. And then they also did a height map, right? Because of course, ultimately paintings are not two-dimensional, right? They're actually very much three-dimensional as the layers of the paint are built up. And so after creating the surface map and using the facial recognition algorithm and having already decided what the subject was going to be, they let the next Rembrandt paint a painting. Right? And this is the outcome. Right? There's a cute short video online, and that there's this palpable excitement among these art historians, right? Because they really don't know what's going to come out, and yet it's a very convincing Rembrandt. So here you've got the master of conveying human emotion, which is one of the ways that we hear Rembrandt referred to, but created entirely by a machine. This is kind of a whole new level of posthumous work. So as we move into this new world of artificial intelligence, really being able to create things on their own, I think we've got Because now the machines are creating wholly original creative works. Copying a style isn't the same as copying the work. You can absolutely get a copyright for it. Bob Dylan created 100,000 new songs next to Rembrandt, did a wholly new painting, and sure, they were taught, right? Somebody programmed them, but we're all taught. You guys are being taught right now. Your professors do not have the copyrights to your works. You are creating them based upon combining all of the things that you're learning and experiencing. So the 1976 Copyright Act not only says gotta be human, but it also says that works produced by mechanical processes for random selection without any contribution by a human author are not registerable. Well, okay. In some ways, this was a desire to make sure that somebody didn't just generate a lot of things, right? And go and claim copyright for it. And you can kind of feel that way when you start thinking about Bob Dylan's 100,000 new songs combining like every musical note together, and then if you let somebody have copyright to that, you're like, well, wait a minute, I don't know, that doesn't seem fair. But what about for something like the next Rembrandt? And does it matter that there's the word produced as opposed to created, right? Because again, the Copyright Office actually allowed that Naruto created his work, right? In some ways, David Slater produced it, right? Somebody else went and developed the photo, right? Whether that means distributing it online. But Naruto created it. And in that same way, maybe these artificial intelligence programs, we should think of them now as being creators as opposed to just a mechanical process that's producing. And in fact, in some ways, they're doing a lot more or similar work to what Jeff Koons says he's doing, right? He's the creator, he's the ideas guy. And he's got this studio of people that are just producing the work. And here you've got our Kingston University professor who very humbly says, well, I didn't know what songs were going to be created. Yes, I put this algorithm together and put it into the machine, but so is he really more of the producer? And then you've got artificial intelligence being the creator. So in one instance, we have a copyright for Jeff Koons, and in another instance, we have automatically the public domain. Should these researchers own the copyright, or should they be not allowed to? Currently, unless they significantly contribute, again, no copyright for it. So I think we have this tension between creator and producer. Keeps coming up a little bit, be it in the studio context or in an artificial intelligence context. And we can see how we romanticize the idea of the creator. But where are we headed? And is that to the disadvantage of the actual creators? Should studio systems have more economic rights, get more credit? Or legal authors granted too much control over creative works or too little? So again, what does this say about who we are and what we value? Particularly as we are moving further and further into the idea of being a wholly creative economy, away from an industrial economy. Do the copyright laws as we currently have them work for us? Right? Will they work for you? Which is a question that you may want to continue to ask yourself. But in the meantime, so that's the philosophical. To end it on a more practical note, as you guys are, working in your careers and in your day-to-day lives. In terms of working with others, or working in studios, or completing commissions, right? You are very rarely going to hire an attorney. I know that. Right? You're not gonna, go and say, oh, here's my 20-page document. Shall we negotiate this? But you can, in advance or throughout the process, engage in honest and generous negotiation. Right? Things always turn out a lot better if you're willing to give just a little bit more, right? Maybe you think you did a little bit more of the work, but split it 50-50 anyway, right? It's a lot easier. Try to do this in advance. When you are still working on something and everybody is friends, that is a wonderful time to discuss what it is, what your expectations were, not once a disagreement has already come up. If you can get this in writing, even if it's just an email, right? You're like, hey, really enjoying working on this project with you, just want to make sure that it's clear that at the end of it, we can do this. If we sell it, we'll split it this way. We have to ask each other first before we do X, Y, and Z. Now, will all of this necessarily be completely super buttoned up, legal, the most wonderful thing ever if a lawyer sees this email? No. Not gonna lie. But it sets the stage, right? And it sets a series of expectations such that you will hopefully never have to talk to a lawyer, right? Because you're like, oh, wait, I didn't know that you meant, that you thought, and it can help you guys have a good discussion, again, before there's ever a problem, right? You don't really want there to be a problem. Offer transparency if circumstances change. If you get an offer to show the work in a big gallery show and all of a sudden you're kind of like, well, I don't really want to mention my co-author, that's not cool. Generally, that's kind of, but if there's a good reason for that, then at least address it in advance, right? Because what you don't want is for your awesome new gallery to get like a cease and desist letter from your co-author's attorney. That is not fun, okay? And then of course provide a truthful accounting. And until the law changes, but if you do all of this, then you can stay human, right? Which apparently is the most important thing for copyright, right? So I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, so there was a lot of talk about the work for hire, but what about internships? Like that's always internships are so sketchy. Like how does that work? But what if you okay, can you talk about like paid internships and unpaid and like how?
Okay, generally speaking, unpaid internships are like not super kosher if you are doing work, right? The employment laws of the country sort of are like, you know what, it has to be super duper educational, and really a legal internship that is unpaid is usually not worth giving to the intern, right? Because you're supposed to be providing this amazing educational experience. They can't be doing work that you would ordinarily pay somebody else to do. And when you look at it, you're like, well, thanks, but no, I don't need an intern to just, for me to act as their mentor all summer long. I need somebody to do this, and I would prefer not to pay for it. Okay, so generally speaking, internships should be paid, which means at least the minimum wage, right? And if that person is doing the sort of work that the organization or the employer does, then you should be an employee, not an independent contractor. Obviously, it is a huge mess of a situation out there because people either don't want to pay people or they're like, oh, I'll give you like $100 in a Metro card. That is not super duper perfect. In terms of copyright, because we could be here until next week talking about employment law issues. But in terms of copyright, since that's really what we're focused on here, absent an assignment, and by assignment, I don't mean like, here, do this. I mean a legal assignment of your rights. Absent that, you still have the copyright. Okay. Unless you are an employee, right? And just because somebody calls you an intern, if it's a paid internship and they're following all the rules, they're just like not giving you the title or sort of saying it's going to be temporary, but you would be an employee in that situation. Yeah.
Hi. What do you think about the future of copyright? Copyright, like 100 years ago, 100 years later.
What do I think about copyright 100 years from now? I think we're going to see a lot more in terms of moral rights in this country. Europe already has them, right? So there's going to be a lot more about what can be done with your work, particularly posthumously. I actually think the next Rembrandt is super interesting in terms of, right, like, how do you guys feel about that? If you're dead and people are like making new works in your style, there may be more control around that, where artists' estates can say, no, you can't do that. and
You think it's
controlling those
similar?
sorts of things, right? I think that's going to be kind of really the brave new world, is how we deal with these types of artificial intelligence questions. There'll probably be some more movement about resale rights and some of the economic rights. And who knows, we may go in a completely different direction where we kind of blow the whole system up and it becomes like a creative licensing situation, like a creative commons, right? I mean, it could fork. Who's to say? I'd be curious what other people think about that. Yeah. Hi.
The copyright law that you're talking about, is that US centric or is that international? The 1976 copyright laws, are they US centric or are they international?
Okay, so the 1976 Copyright Act is US federal law. There are a lot of international treaties. So the most famous one is Berne, right, that we sign on to. And international copyright law is a whole other bear, where a lot of it is very similar. And then there's some differences, right? Where, for instance, we do not have what's known as droit de suite, right? So again, we don't have this resale right that is part of copyright law in Europe. Right? So there are aspects that overlap. There's the WIPO treaty. There's a lot of interlocking things that happen when you're talking about international. But the 1976 Copyright Act is federal copyright law.
Hey, you were speaking earlier. Yeah, you were speaking earlier about VARA.
Yep.
And you mentioned that it included site specificity of the work, and I was wondering when the little girl was installed at Wall Street. Oh, okay. So you're familiar.
Oh, I'm very familiar with.
Yeah,
that girl.
Yeah, which was just corporate propaganda. Yeah.
Fearless girl.
Yes. But the artist who did the bull, who did the charging bull, was very angry about that. Cause it's like you completely decontextualized my sculpture. Like my sculpture was supposed to be making a commentary on Wall Street, and then you turned it into something.
Yeah, you ruined it.
Yeah, you ruined it. So I guess I was just curious if VARA protects people from recontextualizing your work as well by doing something like that.
Okay, so as every lawyer, it's always like, it depends. Generally, no.
Oh, okay.
In this instance, in that very specific instance, no, right? Yeah. Charging bull guy, like, get over it. Right? I mean, frankly, fearless girl, kind of silly as well, in my opinion. But no, he does not get to control the atmosphere around his artwork, right? VARA does not extend so far as that. Yeah.
How you doing? Thank you for the presentation. But speaking on the 100 years from now, since technology is getting better, producing work, won't the like copyright lean on public domain? Since like the artists will put in like their ideas into a computer and the computer will generate the work.
Right.
So from hundreds of years from now, when the technology is way better, so a lot of people will depend on technology, will it change the public domain copyright?
Well, I mean, that's exactly sort of the question, right? Is if artificial intelligence works don't get copyright, so everything that's kind of coming out of these AI producers is automatically in the public domain, well then, yeah, I guess, as a human creator, you have a lot more public domain source material. What you do with that then, the thing that was already in the public domain, if you incorporate that into your work, that part will still remain in the public domain, of course. So yeah, it gets gnarly really fast.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. There's ways to register your work, right? To like if things are not clear, there's ways to register. So you're like, this is my copyright. So what happens if you do that and then another person goes like, hey, no, that's my work, and you're like, yes, but I registered it. Like, what happens there?
Yeah, okay, so you're like so ahead of the curve. All right, so yeah, this whole thing about like, it's automatic. copyright.gov, and you fill out the form, and you make a submission, right, which is essentially a picture of your artwork, and then your copyright is registered. And that's actually, if you use the little C in the circle, that is actually shorthand for, oh, this is registered with the Copyright Office. And what does that give you? That gives you a couple of advantages, which we call statutory advantages, where there's a presumption that it is in fact your work. So if somebody comes along and says, hey, you stole my work, you're like, oh, well, you now have to prove that, right? The burden of proof is on them. You can get extra damages, right? If somebody steals your work, you can get treble damages and statutory damages as well.